was driving home from a late-night shift at the hospital, feeling exhausted and sleepy. The road was dark and deserted, except for the occasional headlights of other cars passing by. I turned on the radio to keep myself awake, but the only station that came in was a creepy podcast about paranormal encounters. The host had a deep, raspy voice that sent shivers down my spine. He was telling a story about a hitchhiker who turned out to be a ghost. As I listened to the podcast, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road, holding a sign that said, "Need a ride." It was a young woman, wearing a white dress and a backpack. She looked harmless and innocent, so I decided to stop and offer her a lift. She thanked me and got in the car, placing her backpack on the floor. I asked her where she was going, and she said she was heading to the next town, where her family lived. She said she had been backpacking across the country, but ran out of money and had to hitchhike. She seemed friendly and talkative, so I tried to make conversation with her. I asked her what her name was, and she said it was Anna. As we drove along, I noticed that the podcast was still playing. The host was getting to the climax of his story, and I felt a chill run through me as I heard his words. He said that the hitchhiker was actually a ghost, who had died in a car accident on that same road years ago. He said that her name was Anna, and that she always wore a white dress and a backpack. He said that she would appear to unsuspecting drivers and ask them for a ride. He said that if they agreed, she would get in the car and then disappear, leaving behind only her backpack. He said that the backpack contained a severed head, which was the only part of her body that was never found after the crash. He said that this was her way of seeking revenge, and that anyone who saw her was doomed. As I heard this, I felt a surge of panic and disbelief. I looked at the woman sitting next to me and saw that she was staring at me with a twisted smile. She said, "You shouldn't believe everything you hear on the radio. Some stories are just made up to scare you, but some stories are true, and you just picked up the wrong hitchhiker." She reached for her backpack and unzipped it. I saw a flash of something bloody and gruesome inside. I screamed and swerved the car, trying to get away from her, but it was too late. She grabbed me by the neck and pulled me closer to her. She said, "Don't worry, I won't hurt you. I just want to show you something that belongs to me." The last thing I saw was her face, inches from mine. Her eyes were cold and dead, and her mouth was wide open, revealing sharp teeth. She bit into my ear, and I felt a searing pain. Then everything went black. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I woke up, I was lying on the side of the road, covered in blood. The car was wrecked, and the woman was gone. So was her backpack. The only thing that was left was the radio, still playing the podcast. The host was saying, "And that, my friends, is the end of tonight's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something. Remember, the next time you see a hitchhiker, think twice before you stop. You never know who they might be or what they might want. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared." This is your host, signing off. I was driving through rural New Jersey when I saw him. A hitchhiker, standing by the side of the road. Surprisingly well-dressed, black suit, slicked back hair, narrow briefcase. Now I know I shouldn't pick up hitchhikers, but I'm 6'4", 230 pounds, with all kinds of hunting equipment in the back of my truck. It's not like this prissy-ass businessman is going to beat me to death and leave me on the side of the road. Besides, I needed gas money. "Hey man," I said, pulling over to the side of the road. "I'll give you a lift if you pay me for gas." "Of course," he said in a polite, almost British accent. He reached for his wallet and pulled out 3 crisp $20 bills. "This enough?" I grinned. That's way more than enough. I greedily snatched the money from him and clicked the locks. "Get in, bud." He climbed in. His blue eyes shifted from the crumpled Wendy's wrapper on the dashboard to the mysterious sticky goo on the middle console. "Sorry, the car's not clean. I'm going hunting," I said, turning back onto the highway. "Hunting? Interesting," he said, in a strangely enthusiastic tone. "Have you always liked to hunt?" "No, it's the funniest thing. Never thought I'd ever hunt. Love animals, got 3 dogs at home. But there are so many deer around these parts when the winter comes. A lot of them starve to death. Not to mention all the car accidents they cause. I trailed off, and we fell into uncomfortable silence. Just hunting for the day then? No, my buddy Matt and I will be out there the whole weekend. He let out a laugh. The whole weekend? Your wife's a saint for letting you go. My wife? How did he... But then my eyes fell on the steering wheel and the silver ring on my finger. Ah, yeah. Mary's a doll. She's actually pregnant, 5 months with a little girl. He gave me a crooked smile. A girl, huh? Yeah. I could feel him staring at me long after we had fallen into silence. It made me feel uncomfortable. I clicked on the radio. How did you meet Matt? He asked, fiddling with the dial. All that came through was static. That's a weird question, I thought. He and Mary were close friends, so when we got married, I got to know him well. The man said. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, and I was suddenly reminded of a psychiatrist. Are you a psychiatrist? I asked him. He laughed. Definitely not. I work in finance. What type of finance? It was my turn to ask the questions now. Futures, he replied noncommittally. I glanced over at him. A small smile was on his lips, and I noticed his fingers had gravitated from his lap to the briefcase at his feet. My heart began to pound. Click, click. He undid the clasps. The case creaked open. What's in your briefcase? I asked. Work. What kind of... His long fingers disappeared into the darkness of the case. He was pulling something out. My body began to seize up. The steering wheel felt like ice under my fingers. I have a lot of hunting equipment back there, I said, so you better not be... I stopped. He was only pulling out a sheet of paper. For a few minutes he was quiet, reading the paper, intently and silently, as if his life depended on it. Scritch, scritch. His fingers slid over it as they traced the text. Then he slipped it back into the case and snapped it shut. What was he reading? I thought. But before I could get the question out, he turned towards me. I could barely see his face in my peripheral vision, but I knew he was staring at me, for minutes on end. Then he broke the silence. Don't go hunting, he said, his ice blue eyes boring into me. What? Turn the car around. Please just go home to Mary. What? She needs you. He paused. Madeline needs you. I paled. I never told him we were going to name our baby Madeline. How did you... He's going to make it look like an accident, he said, his voice gravelly and halting. Just a simple hunting accident. The most punishment he'll endure is 35 minutes in the police station, writing out his statement. But let me off at that diner up ahead. I like their Cobb salad very much. Matt's going to kill me? What are you talking about? He turned to me, eyes wide. What are you talking about? About what you just said. All I said is I'd like you to let me off at the diner, please. He pointed to the exit, curving off the highway. You're going to miss it if you don't slow down. With a shaking hand, I clicked on my blinker, pulled off the exit, into the parking lot. My heart pounded in time with the click, click, clicks of the cooling engine. Thank you for the ride, he said, pulling his briefcase out with him. Have a good drive, will you? I couldn't squeak out a reply before the door slammed shut. I didn't believe him, but my nerves were too shot to continue the trip either. I texted Matt that I was sick, turned around, and went home to Mary. Mary was thrilled. Matt was disappointed. A little too disappointed, if you ask me. A month later, after ignoring most of Matt's calls and texts, which became increasingly frequent and desperate, I heard a faint thumping noise at the door. When I flicked on the porch light, there was Matt, hunched over our doorknob, holding a lockpick. He was trying to get into our home. You could tell he had been drinking all night. We called the police. They came quickly. He fought with them. They took him in for assault on officer charges. He had a pistol on him. Since then, life has been great. Just a few months later, our wonderful little Madeline was born. And as soon as we got back from the hospital, on our doorstep was a little teddy bear, a pink bow sewed on its head. There wasn't a return address or a card of any kind. But I think I know who it was from. In the late 70s, my uncle was studying medicine at the University of Chicago. After a morning class, he decided that he would hitchhike back home to Lincoln Park on the north side instead of paying for a taxi. A man drove up in a Plymouth Satellite and offered my uncle a ride. The man looked normal and seemed friendly, light-hearted even, so my uncle got in the car and they started driving towards Lakeshore Drive. However, once they got there, the man drove south on Lakeshore instead of north, towards Lincoln Park. My uncle told the man he was going the wrong way and to turn around and head north. The man looked at my uncle, put his hand on his knee and said, "No, son, you are coming with me," and smiled darkly at him. My uncle froze in panic, and when they hit traffic near the South Shore, he quickly unlocked the passenger door and ran away without looking back. A year or two later, on a cold December day, my uncle was having coffee in a cafe with my future aunt when he caught something on the TV that made his blood run cold. He saw the man that had picked him up from school that day the year before. He had been arrested for the suspected rape and killing of over 20 young men and boys. The man on the television was John Wayne Gacy, and he had removed the door handle off the passenger side door to prevent the men he picked up from escaping.